Well, welcome to the ICS webinar this morning. This is a presentation by Mary MacKenzie and myself, Rachel Dearnley, and we've entitled it Into the Outdoors and Away with COVID-19. Mary is a senior fellow of the ICS and spends much of her time in the States working with and presenting at conferences. And I'm an ex-colleague or associate, as we are at the moment, working in the UK as a consultant, early years consultant and trainer. So I hope you enjoy this webinar.
Right, well, thank you, Rachel, and welcome everybody to this Into the Outdoors and Away with COVID-19. As Rachel kindly said, I'm Mary MacKenzie, and I'm very, very happy to introduce Rachel, who already has introduced herself. But hello, Rachel.
Hello, Mary. Nice to see you this morning.
Lovely. So we're here in the south of England, and as we speak, I think we have folk from South Carolina and from the UK and South Africa. So it's nicely international. And we really all hope that you're all well today and that your families and colleagues are too, because there's no doubt that COVID-19 has been a shock and a challenge to each and everybody's lives throughout the world. Indeed, here in the UK, we've been heavily affected, and in fact, during the peak of the pandemic, there were 40,000 deaths, and I think at the moment we're just over 45,000. And this obviously has had a huge effect on settings and nurseries all over the world who've valiantly been trying to stay open over the 12-week lockdown and beyond. And one nursery in particular is Barnkids in Chillingfold in Surrey, whom we're delighted to star on video today. They've truly embraced the outdoors, and we hope that you find some sources of reassurance and inspiration, I beg your pardon, if you already haven't opened your setting. We also have an example of a proposed outdoor area in Spartanburg in a disadvantaged area, which is being created from scratch. So Rachel and I are very excited about this because for years we've been advocating outdoor learning, and I think it's about 6 years now I've been pushing it in the States. And for a long time it was sort of considered, yes, that's nice, a little bit cottagey, but whereas now it has been authenticized by governments both here in the UK and in the US, and I even read South Africa is looking towards this. So we really want to help you see the outdoors as an opportunity, not an obstacle, and we hope that the background and videos we're going to show will inspire you or reassure you that young children learn so much better when they're allowed to play freely outdoors. So we're now going to have a little look at what our plan is for the webinar. And that is, does it really matter about getting children outdoors? So it's revisiting theory and practice. How a setting in the UK has adapted their outdoor provision to the COVID-19 situation. And finally, Spartanburg, a practical example of the proposed outdoor development in an area of urban disadvantage. And we'll end up with question time. So you can, during this session, be typing your questions into the chat screen on the right-hand side, and depending on the number of questions, we'll answer some at the end of this webinar, but if we run out of time, we will endeavour to answer them all and put them on the ICS website. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Rachel, who's going to talk about the theory and practice.
Thank you, Mary, and hello to everybody out there. It's lovely to be here and have this opportunity to talk to you about something that Mary and I are very passionate about. And trying to find a starting point for this was fairly obvious for us, actually, because we want to talk about play, because play is absolutely what's at the heart of child development. And play is innate. Children are totally motivated to investigate and explore, and it's through their play that they do all this and that they learn and they make progress. And play to them and us as adults, when we're playing with them or when we're just playing as adults, play is joy. Play is awe and wonder, finding something fantastic and wanting to know more about it. How does it work? What does it do? And so it's a fascination that they have, but it can also be frustration and disappointment. And that's innate in play as well, isn't it? When you're struggling to do something and you show that perseverance to get over it and reach your end goal. And all of that process is about growing the brain, because when children are playing, the neurons are being created in their brains, and those are making new connections, thousands and thousands and millions of them, every time they find something new, a new smell, a new taste. Those neurons are being created and the connections are firing up. And so I wanted to start with Fred Rogers. And Fred Rogers, I'm sure you all know from over there in the pond, he has this wonderful quote that play is often talked about as if it were a relief from serious learning. But for children, play is serious learning. Play really is the work of childhood. So we know, don't we, from what I said and what Fred Rogers, albeit in a very small example, that play really is at the heart of learning. And play can go on anywhere, can't it? It can go on indoors, it can happen outdoors, it happens throughout the day. And we need to find the right environment for children to play in. We need to give them so many wide-ranging opportunities to make those neurons, create those neurons and the connections. And, you know, going outside is a natural play area, a natural playground for children. And Margaret Macmillan, back in 1925, she said, "The best classroom and the richest cupboard is roofed only by the sky." So even back then, her forward thinking, her beliefs were really centered around being in the outdoors and children playing and running and jumping and developing holistically because they had the opportunities in the outdoors. So we have those two factors. We have play, we have the outdoors, rich environments, and rich environments indoors as well. But we need to be confident that the outdoors really is the place to go to take our children, especially at the moment while we've got COVID-19 going on. And so taking them into the outdoors is a lovely, rich environment. But the third factor that really goes to help children learn even better is you, as practitioners, parents, grandparents, friends, whoever you are, being with children, playing with them in a wonderfully rich environment. It couldn't be better for them. And so this is a nice little poster that I found on a website called Children and Nature Network, and it's up there in the top left-hand corner if you wanted to go off and have a little look. It's full of resources. But this poster really does capture it all in a nutshell. So time spent in nature, it really is so beneficial to children in so many ways. And down at the bottom here, you can see just a few of those. Children seem to play better together in the outdoors. They have the space, they have the imagination. Their behaviours seem to be better with all the, again, the space and the resources, the unlimited resources outside in nature. And so they benefit from increased self-esteem, and therefore improved grades and stronger emotional connections. And added to which, while you're in the outdoors with children and showing them all these wonderful things, and they're discovering and playing and being motivated to learn, they begin to connect with nature. And there's the little quote in the corner there on the right: time in nature during childhood and role models who care for nature are the two biggest factors that contribute to environmental stewardship in adulthood. And with the sustainability and the concerns about the earth at the moment, it really does benefit children and adults and generations of children to get outside and be at one with nature. But apart from that, it also, being in nature, exercising, etc., boosts your energy. It helps your eyesight, your vision, stops you. You're less likely to develop nearsightedness. Boosts your immune system. You get a good dose of vitamin D, which we've heard on, certainly in the UK, that vitamin D can be a factor in recovery from COVID-19. It restores your focus and your attention. And I can only give myself as an example. Perhaps in the last month, putting this presentation together, you know, sometimes you get writer's block. You don't know where you're going with it. And for me, getting outside into my garden or just into the woods for a walk, I come back and I'm totally renewed and ready to go again, focusing and attending. And it's the same for children. It's really good, as I say, for well-being. It helps your mood. You see sights and sounds and smells and things that really do help your well-being. And, you know, it's just generally easier to exercise outdoors, which we have a problem here in the UK with childhood obesity, and I'm pretty certain that you do out in the States. If we get children out into nature, it builds their resilience and their strength, and burns more calories. So it's really a why wouldn't you get them out into the woods scenario. But let's have a little look. Let's just focus in on, why do children need exercise in the outdoors? And I want to give you a few facts here, key facts that Mary and I find quite interesting. But this quote is really powerful. Exercise cues the building blocks of learning and is the single most powerful tool to optimize brain function. And, you know, again, I'm going to emphasize this, is the single most powerful tool to optimize brain function. And apart from the obvious, exercise really does build the body. When you're exercising, you create more red blood cells, take more oxygen around the body, and that in turn improves the function of your lungs and your heart. And it's really good for overall body performance. Now, the first interesting fact: children are innately driven to move. When they move, it helps their child development to progress. But when they move, and when we move, it releases dopamine. Dopamine makes us feel happy, alert, invigorated. And because of that, we want to move more. And there's a chemical in the brain called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF. You don't need to remember it, but it's an interesting fact. So when that's released, it fires up and it creates, in the brain, it creates the neurons and the connections. So it's only produced when you move. When you're not moving, when you're sedentary, when you're sitting down, BDNF is not released in the same enormous way that it is when you're moving. And so being sedentary means that you're not really learning as much as you could do if you were moving. So learning, therefore, happens best when you're exercising and you're moving around. And sitting still is just about the worst way to learn things. And it's something that we really have to bear in mind. Here's another interesting fact. Vision doesn't properly develop unless you move your body in a rich 3D environment. Now, it's not the same if children are in buggies or sitting in the car. They need to move their entire body through space in a 3D environment so that their eyes can track those movements. And when their eyes are tracking, the muscles are grown strong. And that's what helps vision to develop healthily. So if you move your body much more than when you're sitting down, your brain gets huge amounts of information. And when you're moving, your muscles send messages to your brain to tell you where you are in space and where and how you're balancing. And those are two senses that Mary's going to talk about a bit later. So the big message here really is physicality, moving and exercise are at the heart of development and learning. Physicality is critical for young children, and it's the heart of child development. Being outdoors is a place where children move in many ways and tackle many different terrains and physical challenges. The opportunities are unlimited. So again, you have to ask yourselves, why wouldn't we get our children outdoors as much as possible? But I want to add one more factor to what's at the heart of learning. And this is a quote by Eleanor Roosevelt. I think at a child's birth, if a mother could ask a fairy godmother to endow it with the most useful gift, that gift should be curiosity. And I read this and I thought, well, why is she saying that? What is it that why isn't she choosing kindness or happiness or, you know, the usual obvious ones that perhaps I might have chosen? And here's why. And this gentleman, Bruce Perry, has put it quite succinctly in an article he's written called The Fuel of Development. And you can Google that, it comes up quite easily. But what he says is that curiosity really does fuel the brain. When we're curious about something new, we want to explore it. And children have an innate motivation and curiosity to explore. They want to know how things happen. How does the light switch work? You know, the little toddler who turns it on and off all the time and gets pleasure because something's happening there. It's the light's on, the light's off, and I choose which way to press it. So gradually they master things, and through exploration they discover the light turns on if I press it this way, it turns off if I press it the other way. That gives me great pleasure because it's a lovely cause and effect toy. The light's coming off, that's great, the light's off, woohoo, it's fun. So they have pleasure, so they repeat it more. And as they repeat that action, that leads to mastery. And as they learn to turn the switches on and off, they might find other switches that do other things. And that leads to new skills and confidence and self-esteem, leading to a sense of security. And guess what? When they reach there, what do they want to do? They get curious about something else and they want to explore it. So curiosity really is at the heart of learning. And let's just translate that into going into the outdoors. If children find this wonderful environment outdoors, that's ever-changing, that's fluid, you know, one day it might have leaves on the tree, the next day it might not. But what an Aladdin's cave you'll find on the forest floor. And you've got the sounds of the wind, the stickiness of the mud mixed with water and moss, the melting icicles on a winter's day, sticks that bend, sticks that snap, sticks that when you put them on the fire, they create smoke, and those that create flames. Grass that smells delicious and feels soft underfoot. All these experiences fire up curiosity, the urge to explore, discover, and find pleasure.
Thank you, Rachel. That was really interesting. I'd like to continue now talking about resilience. I found it really interesting over this pandemic period to observe how different people are reacting to this. Um, and I'm finding it particularly interesting that the people whom I thought were very confident and very together are very fearful and quite timid, and those adults and children whom I thought would have been very scared with the whole situation are actually quite calm and sanguine about it. And I've been thinking about this a lot, and I'm just wondering if it has something to do with the resilience factor. So what is resilience? It's the ability to adapt well to adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats, or even significant sources of stress. Coronavirus is certainly a very stressful situation. It's being able to bounce back from the aforementioned. Now, it's not something that children either have or do not have. So whereas some children are athletic, some children are more artistic, and that's an innate, that's in them. It's actually a skill that children develop as they grow. In order to grow resilience, children need certain conditions, and one of them is very definitely the natural world. Um, the outside provides different surfaces, textures, and slopes, which children need to use their whole bodies to negotiate a wet hill or a slope with sticks, leaves, stones, and logs, which then they need, which helps them build up their muscle power. Tackling these with confidence, practice, and a have a go attitude is part of building resilience, but it also includes a positive attitude, optimism, the ability to regulate emotions, and the ability to see failure as useful feedback and problem-solving abilities. And we as adults really need to help children to do this. One of the things that I know we often talk about is, cocooning our children, and there are all the expressions from helicopter through lawn mowing, even to snow plowing, snowplow parents or carers. And what we're really wanting is for children to have a go, to fail, because that's how we usually learn, is through failure, and really to sort of scaffold their learning so that they become immune to the odd bumps that they get on the way. And I know it's particularly worrying in our universities and colleges today. A lot of our students who have been, and parents and carers do this in the most loving way, have protected the children so much that by the time they actually come to college and have to stand on their own 2 feet, sadly sometimes they just can't handle the failure, and it's tragic how in a lot of places the suicide rates are so high. So we also, as far as nature is concerned, we need to be thinking about, we talk about the 7 senses, and you all know the 5 senses as well, and I'm sure most of you know the other 2, but for those who don't, there's the proprioceptive sense, which tells us where our bodies are in space without having to look. So it's like when we climb steps or stairs, we as adults and children, once they've mastered it, don't look at every step. We just know they're there. And similarly, there's the vestibular sense, which is, this contributes to balance and spatial awareness and emotional development. And I'm sure you've often seen children just spinning madly. And to us as adults, it's like, wow, aren't they getting dizzy? But they've managed to do this. Or you'll see them on a swing, a rope swing, or just an ordinary swing, and it goes round and round and round and then back again. Well, what they're actually doing is they're building their vestibular sense, and the ability, and Rachel spoke earlier on about how getting children to sit still is not really part of the curriculum for young children, because they learn far better when they're moving. And in fact, the ability to sit totally still is one of the most advanced of all movement activities. And it's not possible until the vestibular system is well developed, which can take up to the age of 7. And what age do we get our little ones sitting at a table working? Age 4. Right, we're going to now talk about nature deficit disorder. And this was coined by Richard Louv in his Last Child in the Woods. And it states that human beings, especially children, are spending less time outdoors, resulting in wide range of behavioral problems. This is an unwanted side effect of the electronic age. And as Rachel previously mentioned, really children need to be moving. And I know we've spoken about the chemical brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or BDNF, and I don't mind mentioning it a few times in this presentation, because it is important and a lot of us haven't heard of that. And as she stated, it's only made when we move. And this chemical is vital for memory and learning. So when you move, you're learning, and where better to do this than in the outdoors? And, you know, Richard Louv, he spoke about how widespread attention to the alienation of children from the natural world happens when they don't go into the outdoors. And I know it's something that we are all very aware of and need to be focusing on. I would just add that nature deficit disorder, it's not a medical condition. It's a description of the human cost of alienation from nature. So I think we're now going to talk about physical challenge and risk-taking. And this is the last bit of theory, because I know you're all dying to get onto the actual video, and I'm looking forward to that too. So zero risk-taking and zero-risk childhood is a myth, and so is a zero-risk setting. Children need to learn how to manage the risks and challenges they encounter in everyday life. And Helen Tovey explains that risk-taking in play allows you to demonstrate your competences. It requires instant judgment about danger and about safety, and some planning and foresight. So risk is part of being alive. I mean, you all took a risk this morning getting out of bed, maybe driving in your cars. And life is just full of varied risks. Children take risks. I mean, babies wouldn't learn to crawl, to negotiate steps, or to stand up. And children wouldn't learn how to ride a bike or to even run and climb without being prepared to take a risk, to tumble, and to learn from the consequences. So risk is really about being prepared to have a go at something, being adventurous, learning new experiences, and, you know, trying again. It's very interesting. You know, various researchers have said that children who learn in their early years to make their own reasoned decisions rather than simply doing what they are told to by others will be in a stronger position to resist the pressure they will inevitably face as they reach their teenage years. And that is interesting again, isn't it, to observe how some children who are quite independent, sadly, quite often in our compliant child ethos, a teacher will say, oh, it's wonderful, I have a class of 20 and they're all as good as gold. Great. But actually, are they the ones who are questioning, who are curious, who are actually the risk takers, who sometimes are pushing the boundaries? Those are the children that we should really be, nurturing, just to help them for later life, to give them kind of, street credibility, I suppose you'd call it. So to look at risks, we obviously need to look at risk-benefit analysis, and it's balancing risk against benefits. So for example, crossing the road, the danger is high, but the likelihood of getting hurt is low if we put in good strategies of teaching children how to cross a road safely. So again, as Rachel said earlier, it's really just empowering our children to make their own decisions once they have actually tried things out and seen what works. Right, with no further ado, we're now going to go on to the actual video, and I'll hand over to Rachel.
Thanks, Mary. That was really interesting and complements what I was saying very nicely. So now we get to the even more exciting part. We're going to show you some videos of Barnkids Forest School. We spent a morning there back in, I think it was the beginning of end of June, I think, wasn't it, Mary? Just seeing how they had adapted their current practice to COVID to get the children outdoors and lower the risk of infection. So we've known Barnkids for, I dread to think how many years, it's at least 10, maybe more. But recently, 3 years ago, it was taken over by a lady called Laura Jones, and she has been developing the practice for the last 3 years, and Mary and I have been involved in many different ways in helping her to do that. It's an idyllic setting. It really is the kind of place that you would die for to get, if you get the sense. But she has been very lucky to get this little spot in the middle of the countryside. And whilst we know that a lot of you out there listening won't have this kind of setting, we really just wanted to showcase it as what we think is not just best practice, but excellent practice. So
I'm just going to interrupt there, Rachel. It was the 3rd of July we were in.
Thank you. Okay, so 3rd of July. So just to put you in the picture, there are a cluster of buildings, if you like, 3 buildings. One's the baby and toddler unit, has its own dedicated outdoor area. Then they have another little, it's a hall, I guess you'd say, but it was actually the old chicken run, so it's called the chicken run, and that houses the 2 to 3 year olds. Again, with their own dedicated outdoor area, grassy area, and hard standing area. And then a beautiful barn where the preschool children go. Prior to COVID, children went to the forest 2 or 3 times a week, mainly from the preschool, but the 2 to 3 year olds would build up their stamina to be able to walk there. So effectively they were going, but they were just doing the walking and staying there for a short time. So a bit of background on forest schools. Forest schools are a real thing over here. They were developed in the 1950s in Scandinavia. They came over here in the 1990s, and since then they've been really gathering strength. They're run by qualified practitioners who take a level 3 and become supervisors in the forest. And it follows a child-centered pedagogy. So planning is existent, but it's very much based on what is in the forest at the time and what the children are showing interest in. So without further ado, we will carry on to the first video where Laura is going to give you an introduction to Barnkids herself.
Laura, how lovely to be here today. Thank you so much for having us at Wonderful Barnkids, which Rachel and I just love. I'm going to throw it right over to you. Would you introduce Barnkids and tell us just a little bit about Forest Schools, because there may be some people viewing who don't know anything about Barnkids.
Yeah, so Barnkids is a beautiful nursery set in the Surrey countryside. We have a maximum of 74 children every day between the ages of 0 to 5 before they go to school. We start getting them outside early, so when they're babies we go out in, we have off-road buggies and we take them out into the fields, and then they start their journey from there really, and so they go through the nursery, and as they get older and more capable and more competent, then they start doing different activities and taking different risks. In regards to Forest School, so Forest School is all about spending a lot of time and engaging with nature and being outdoors, and it's about allowing the children to take risks according to their age and capability, and it's about the children forming that relationship with nature, and being confident to use the things in the environment rather than toys and plastic and different things like that.
Wonderful. So Laura explained nicely there a little bit about forest schools and how the children learn to take risks and use the resources in the environment. And we're just going to now see how they actually implement the COVID guidance. Laura, one of the focuses obviously is in this very sad time, the pandemic, and we'd just love you to talk us through and show us round what you're doing to counteract measures of COVID. So shall we start having a little walk around?
Yeah, so basically what we've done is we've reduced our class sizes, and so we've separated our classrooms into smaller groups, and then we've moved our preschool outside. And so this area here, which is the Dutch barn, we've made into an outdoor classroom. So the children that are in this group don't actually spend any time inside.
No time at all?
No, not at all. And then we've introduced hand washing is a big part of the routine.
I think I can see a couple. Shall we go and have a look?
Yeah. So we've made hand washing stations. So the children will come in here in the morning, and actually it's great for independence. They're actually, originally we had them outside and the parents would wash hands with them. Now they come inside and wash hands on their own, and they just go over to the hand washing station, and then they wash their feet as well. And then Wonderful. They come into the outside area. So this is the classroom that we've got, and this pod is called Owls. And so we associated all of our pods with different animals, and they've really taken on the owls idea. This is our planning board, so we do this inside, so we've now brought our planning outside.
Excellent.
And we try and follow the children's interests in terms of what they're doing and what they're looking at.
Wonderful.
So then we do have something set up in here for the morning time, just while the children are waiting for the other children to join them. So again, we try and introduce lots of nature. You can see there that we've got the ladybirds and the bees, Wonderful. And they're filling them with natural things. And we've got the beginnings of a garden. Can't think what. Herb garden.
And sensory, I'm sure, yes. And what have you got here? Is this where they hang up all their belongings?
Yes. So at this age, they should be recognising their own names.
Indeed.
And so we encourage them to recognise their own names and hang on their pegs. If they're struggling to recognise their own names, they do recognise their own animal.
Wonderful.
And so then they start to associate their name as well with that. So they hang their coats up on the pegs.
Great.
And get ready to go out to the forest.
And this is marvellous. This is the Dutch barn.
Yes.
I love the way you have the hay bales as
differentiating the areas?
Yeah.
Straight from the farm?
Yes, and we decided to do that so the children could still see their friends in the other groups.
Oh, wonderful.
So they could still stay socially distanced, but they could still say hello to each other and it not be too separate.
Wonderful.
Okay, so Laura's explained in that video what she's done to counteract COVID, which has taken some great organisation. And it's interesting that the children go outside all day. They don't actually go into any of the barns or the chicken run at all. One thing I wanted to point out in this video is that when she went to the hand station, you in fact didn't see the water, and that's because the water is contained in 2 large flasks that then go out to the forest school with them. So they've actually disappeared to the forest school with the children. So you'll see them later on, and you'll see the hand washing stations there as well. The other thing I wanted to point out, and I keep seeing new things in these videos as we go along, but the hand station itself has been made out of an old builder's pallet. And we can get those free over here. I'm certain you probably can in the States. But that was something that they've made out of nothing for absolutely no money. And that's what we're all about in this video, is trying to show you as well how little money you can spend on creating wonderful environments for your children. So, so here we go. The next video, we're actually on the journey to the forest school.
The children come straight in. What time do they arrive?
Between 8 and 9 in the morning.
And they go straight to the Dutch barn.
Yeah.
And then how long do they spend in the Dutch barn?
Not very long at all. We aim to get them out within 20 minutes of their arrival time. So each pod has an arrival time, which reduces the number of parents here at any one point. Okay. And then we aim to get them out within 20 minutes of them arriving. So we'll make sure that they've got suntan lotion, hat, long trousers and long sleeves, just because of the tick risk in Surrey countryside. And then they'll get on their way and come out to the forest.
And the parents go as far as the Dutch barn, do they?
Yes.
And turn straight round and after dropping their child off.
Yes.
So they don't actually go into the nursery area, as it were, in the Dutch barn.
No, and we've actually found that handovers are much easier now we do it outside.
Yeah.
And the children just go on their way very, very quickly, actually. And that's why we moved hand washing to inside the room. So then they sort of have that to focus on. They leave their parents, and it works really well.
Excellent. And no cases of COVID or no suspected or?
No. I think we've had one member of staff go for a test, who had a sore throat and cold-like symptoms, but apart from that, no.
Okay, so here we are in the distance. There it is. You've got a bell tent?
Yeah, the bell tent is for our 2-year-old children, and they use that for privacy for nappy changing and then for their sleep time.
Wonderful. And that little sort of porter cabin thing before in front of us, what is that?
So that's our temporary toilet. Because we've increased the number of children, we need increased toileting facilities. So we have a self-composting toilet on order, but they take about 6 weeks. So we had to improvise and bring in a portaloo.
Brilliant. The field is looking wonderful too.
So you will see there that it's a really lovely but fairly long walk from the Dutch barn to the forest school, and one of the practitioners kindly worked it out for us. It's about 500 meters. So the children walk 500 meters there and 500 meters back every day, as well, obviously, as running around and doing all the wonderful things that they do. So despite there being relatively low number of cases in of COVID in Surrey, and they do, and we do, continue to be alert and keep ourselves safe. And it's really reassuring to know that at Barnkids there haven't been any cases of COVID. So it looks as though something is working. Right, now we're going to get to the part where what I know you've all been waiting for, and that is actually to see the practice in the setting, in the forest school, I beg your pardon.
Good boy. Hi, you're right.
Yeah. Is this your bonfire?
What?
No, what
Does
is
that
it?
mean Margaret?
It's a bonfire. Is it? It's a bonfire, is it? What's your bonfire? Oh, that's a bonfire, is it? Yeah. You've been putting leaves in your bonfire. What else have you been putting in your bonfire? These cool. You got some logs. How many logs have you got?
Slowly, use your hands. Use your hands. Wow, look, how many eggs do you have? Count them.
I got one.
Wow. Show your friends. Acorn. It's an acorn.
Going to egg.
Wow, is there any more? Use your hands.
William, where's your horn on your steering wheel? Can you show me? Where's your horn? Where's your horn, Austin? What about this? Beep, beep. Beep, beep. You find your horn. Good job. William, where's your horn on your steering wheel? Beep, beep. Okay, ready? So the horn, what do you guys do on the bus? Do you remember?
Own menus and wrote on our blackboard, and then we added some toys and equipment.
And eyeballs. And eyeballs, Willa. Eyeballs.
That's great.
Not eyeballs,
Got an-
I hope you enjoy just getting a little taster to begin with. And you can see the environment, the kinds of activities that the children are doing, the areas that they've set up, and also, you know, the very natural resources that they're making use of. And we're going to see more of the area, other areas in the forest schools in other videos. But one thing we wanted to just say here is how excited Mary and I were when we first looked at these videos to see the interactions of the staff with the children and how natural they were. They were playing with them, alongside them. They were scaffolding their language. You know, the young man who was with the group of boys pointed out an acorn when the little boy said, it's a dinosaur egg, as in dinosaur egg. How lovely is that? You know, that this young lad is naturally giving them all this rich language. Mary and I have visited a good few nurseries in our careers, and the first things that we normally do when we go into a nursery look at the interactions, and somehow the interactions get very much more expertise, if you like, or better quality when practitioners are outside. Indoors, we tend to see a lot of focus on routines, so getting nappies changed, pulling children away from their learning because they must have a clean diaper, I think we call them out there, which is important. We're not saying it shouldn't be done, but you know, getting tables wiped and ready for snacks and lining them all up and get their coats on to go outside. And that's all fine, that's all good, you know, good practice. But what we see outside is that how much more relaxed practitioners are with those routines, and they just seem to key focusing more on what the children are doing rather than what needs doing. And also what we saw beautifully in that little clip is children creating, imagining, being creative, and having a go at things. And what we didn't see is fear. We don't see fear out in the forest somehow. You know, fear of answering a question wrongly, or creating something and not being able to do it. Because actually what we don't want to do is kill that curiosity. Fear really does kill curiosity. And what we're seeing out there is adults being available. And what really nurtures curiosity is that very fact. Adults who are explaining, demonstrating, exploring ideas, communicating and modelling language, showing and providing narrative for what they're doing, facilitating and setting challenges. And all of those words describe exactly how we should be teaching in the early years. So on to the next video. Mary is just asking a few questions of Laura about how she's adapted to COVID-19 in the outdoors.
Laura, we're now in the forest school, which is so wonderful, and we can hear Old MacDonald being sung at the back, which is very appropriate. Would you like to tell us now how you have adapted your forest school to the COVID-19 and what you have improved upon from the last time I was here?
So to be honest, what we've done is we've embraced what COVID has meant to the nursery. So prior to COVID occurring, we had about 10 children that came out to forest school every day, and the children who came to nursery would take turns in it being their day. So actually COVID has given us a real excuse to actually move everybody outdoors. And so now instead of 10 or...
interrupt you, everybody.
Apart from the babies, yeah.
Wonderful.
Everybody. So when we used to have 10 or 15 children out here every day, we now can have upwards of about 45.
45?
Yeah, out in the forest every day. So what's that's meant is we've cleared some of the areas to make a bit more space. Over here we've got the younger children's area. We have delineated this with the hay bales, as they aren't as aware of not mixing between the groups, so we've created a special camp for them.
Right.
The first week there was nothing in this camp, and actually the team and the children have built it together. So they've brought things down, they've put tents up, you know, really interested in climbing, so they've put ropes between trees. They've started off quite low and they will get higher as the children become more competent. And then for the older children who are over this side of the forest, we've separated them into two camps, so they have two special areas that they use as well. So the badgers will use one area in the week and the owls will use the other, and then they might swap round depending on the children.
So Laura actually just emphasises beautifully how they have embraced the whole COVID and what it means, and it's given them the opportunity to have all the children outside. As you heard her say, they started off with just 10 children coming out, and I think there were 45 there on that day. And it's good. She's clearly delighted and confident in the vision and ethos for the children, which it's really important to have a vision as a team, and without a clear vision, the way ahead becomes unclear, particularly in times of challenge. So visions can and should change as experiences, you know, as you have different experiences, and this is something that Barnkids has done. They've really looked at what the present circumstances are, and they've managed to adapt things very much in unison with the staff. And Laura spoke, and there's a lovely young practitioner called Amy, who sadly wasn't there on the day we were filming, but she has been very visionary in this, and the whole team has indeed. Now, we do realise that a lot of nurseries just don't have this facility at all, but the important thing is just to be outdoors. And even if you have a concrete playground, you can do so much with it. I have visited settings that have really transformed it with so much, growing things, etc. So really just think about it. Also, it was really interesting to see how they've adapted one part of the forest school for the younger children, and that the staff did it in unison with the children. So in other words, they really empowered the children to have their say in what they needed. So let's go on and look at the next slide, which again is all about the environment.
This is kind of our working area, to be honest. So this is where all the food will come into. This is where we do our hand washing. So this is quite a busy area at lunch times, for example, or snack times, where we operate out of here and then get the food out to the children. So you've got your drinking water, your water canisters, your cool boxes, all that different type of thing. So it's a bit of an administrative area, really.
And do you try to maintain social distancing, or what happens in that area?
No. Between adults we try and maintain social distancing. So the team work with their pod and only their pod.
Oh, could you tell us about a pod?
Yes, so we have separated all of our nursery children into pods. Okay. So the preschool children will go into a pod of between 10 and 15, so they have owls and badgers. And then in our toddler space, the pods will be between 8 and 12, and we have squirrels, hedgehogs and foxes. And then our smaller children, our babies, will be in pods of 6, and we have ducklings and bunnies. But we don't do social distancing. Children can't socially distance.
Absolutely.
And so the best thing that we've done is the hand washing routine.
Indeed.
And they hand wash regularly. And we also do take their temperatures at different times of the day, just to monitor that. And then being outside.
That is the huge advantage,
yes.
is the outdoor area.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's as Laura described it, as their admin area, if you like. And down there in the right-hand corner, you can see the very flasks that I was talking about that should have been in the Dutch barn, but are now out in the forest school. And Laura also talked about food, the lunches and the snacks. They have a catering company that delivers their hot food during the day. And that's brought out to the forest school by a buggy. And the children, as she said, they've adapted themselves really well. They tend to either sit on the logs. I think you might have seen the log circle behind Laura in a previous video. So they sit on those, or they kneel and put their food on the log. So they've adapted themselves very well. And, she explains that social distancing isn't possible with young children, but to counteract that, they do frequently hand wash with their children, and they take their temperatures throughout the day. So I think, the fact that they still haven't had any cases, and we're touching wood as I say that, whatever they're doing is working. So the next video is a glimpse into the actual learning environment, and we can see children in this playing, learning, and Tracy, the manager, explains to Mary how it all works.
Got to sort the data out, she said it's because the handbrake wasn't in the right place.
Tracy, so tell me, how have you actually developed all of this? I see lots of new exciting things.
Yeah, so we've been, there was a base of a camp here anyway, but since we've been coming down here with a bigger group, they've developed it further. So we'll just go up onto the bridge.
Hello.
Good morning. So, So since they've been coming more, they've added more areas and more things, and the children have been working on building on the environment. So now we have a mud kitchen, and they've... What have you been making in there, Willa? You've been hammering.
I made with evening, but now all the water has gone.
Has all the water gone? So maybe we could spoon it and make moulds with it. Do you think we could do that? Should we take it up there and you can find some shapes and moulds? They made their own menus and wrote on our blackboard, and then we added some toys and equipment.
And eyeballs. And eyeballs, Willa. Eyeballs.
That's great.
Eyeballs,
So we've been talking about Room on the Broom this week, so all our activities have been focusing around the story of Room on the Broom. So they've been making potions and spells and broomsticks. We had broomsticks one day as well, where they got their own twigs and put leaves on, and then they flew across the field.
And here's an example.
Oh, look at the broomstick.
What is the witch's stuff?
And then this is their focused activity today. So they've been finding natural elements to make their birds from the Room on the Broom.
They've done really well actually, they've loved it.
Yeah, fun.
Well done, Evie. Having a drink? We drink some water.
So we've shown you the other areas they've been developing.
I'm not sleeping.
They've made some dens and some camps over the week.
Hey, this is exciting.
We should make some beds.
Is that your dinosaur? And then this is our fairy garden. So they keep adding to it. So we've got a dinosaur cage now, which is from their interests and from what they wanted to make.
Wonderful.
So they found the sticks and they've been weaving. Dinosaurs even ended up in the pond.
Yeah, and I see you have maths involved there with the
Numbers,
with
yep.
the numbers on. Brilliant. And look at this wonderful, look at that wonderful house there with the door and windows. And is that like a clay model there?
Yeah, so they've used clay, they've used pebbles, they've used wood, they've used the ferns from the area around us.
Yes, absolutely. And is that a terracotta pot?
Yeah, it's a little chimney pot that
A
one
chimney pot.
of our staff brought in to use. And I think actually maybe the chimney pot was a project she did when she was at furloughed.
Oh, wonderful. So your staffs are always busy.
We obviously have been looking at the learning environment, and it's really interesting to see all the opportunities for learning that there were there, both physical, imaginative, maths, literacy, etc. And it was lovely to see the emergent writing on the menu board, and then of course the mud kitchens and the obsession with eyeballs. And similarly, you know, in the fairy garden, to see clay modelling and natural clay being used along with, you know, normal clay. And I think for me, one of the things I love about this is just to see how the children are being listened to and how they are earning their space. And the staff are really facilitators. You know, Maria Montessori spoke about directresses, and she meant that staff were facilitating rather than actually teaching. So really honing in on the children's interests and then expanding that and facilitating their way of absolutely flying. So the next slide we're going to look at is, what about the weather?
I get it.
Right, well, there's one big question, whether we be in Surrey, England, or in South Carolina, or in South Africa, and that is, what do you do when the weather is really inclement?
We have different options. We have to take into consideration high winds. So for example, if there's high winds, they have to be away from the trees. So they may do an activity in the field, or they may come down to the barn. Thunder and lightning, they have to leave. So they would come down to the Dutch barn and do activities. Cold, wet, we're just out in all weathers. And it's the clothes and the equipment that we have that makes it suitable.
Brilliant.
And the children actually really enjoy being out in the rain.
They do?
So there's some of the days where it's really wet and really miserable.
Yeah, and I like muddy puddles.
You do like muddy puddles, exactly. And you know, I think, oh, it's cold out, but the children just love it. The children do love it. But we're very lucky here at Barnkids because we do have the Dutch barn.
Make mud pies when it's
So the Dutch barn is cold when it's very warm,
Yeah.
and it's warm when it's very cold. So that also gives us an element of shelter as well. If we
Brilliant.
and marching, walking, and being energetic is a good
Absolutely.
way to stay warm.
Aldi,
And also it's the clothes. So it's having the clothes to change into when we get
Indeed.
back, so they're not sat in wet clothes. It's layering up, so they have lots of layers. So if they're cold, they have them on, and as they warm up, they take them off. And it's having the right waterproofs as well.
and Albie and Will, would you like to show Rachel what you're wearing? I can't remember. What do you call those that you've got on your feet?
wellies.
Wellies, of course.
A lovely little clip. So the little boys there, Albie and his friend Will. Albie is actually Laura's middle boy. She has 3 boys, and all 3 have been, well, 2 of them, the 2 youngest ones, Albie and her youngest one, are actually in the nursery, and her eldest child has gone on to school now. So the boys were very excited in this little clip because they had just been introduced to a new bird hide, and so they came on our little walk with us, and I think they stole the show rather. But really interesting to hear what they're saying about clothing. You know, the children love being outdoors, and as Laura said, you know, some days she thinks it was a bit cold or it was a bit wet, but they still go. And a lot of the barriers that we have found in nurseries in trying to get people to take children outdoors is not the children, it's the adults. The adults who don't enjoy going outside and would prefer to be warm and cozy inside. Actually, we have to overcome those barriers because, you know, as we've been saying throughout this video, you know, the rewards for the learning are so much better in nature. So the next video is we're interviewing Laura again and asking her about whether there have been any adverse effects on the children of COVID-19.
So we can absolutely see here that the wonderful effects that the outdoors is having on your children. We've seen them digging, being so physical, using their imagination, etc., etc. Are there any were there any particular adverse effects that being in the woods has had on your children?
So no, I don't think there are any adverse effects of being in the woods with the children. I think from COVID and being closed, I would say that children coming back into nursery, some of the children we would have expected to have been potty trained at that point weren't. We don't know whether it's a result of COVID or not, but what we do here is when we see the signs of children being ready, we work with parents in partnership to help drive that forward. And so, you know, that may have been lacking during lockdown, but apart from that, you know, the children coming back to us are calm, settled, and really excited about being back and playing with their friends.
Yeah, wonderful.
So, just before I comment on this slide, I'd just like to say on the weather one that I've visited quite a lot of a few forest schools and some outdoor learning environments in the US. And obviously for you, one of the big factors is heat. And, you know, I've heard so often, oh, how can we take the children out in such a hot climate? Having spoken to those who've actually done it, they're saying that, again, you know, children are so adaptable, and provided they're wearing sun hats and have plenty of hydration, they deal with it well. So I think we need to, as Rachel so wisely said earlier, it's really our prejudices or our anxieties we need to overcome, because, you know, as I'm sure it was said earlier on, there's no bad weather, just bad clothing. And I'm going to give you a very brief little story that Laura told me whilst that was being filmed, of Albie, who came into the kitchen the other morning and told his mummy that his tummy was hurting. And Laura asked him what she thought it could be, and he said, "It's the white blood cell soldiers in my tummy fighting the coronavirus germs," out of the mouths of babes. So to go back to the adverse effects of coronavirus on the children, and I do apologize, the sound wasn't great in that video clip, nor will it be in the next one. The wind, as Tracy had alluded to earlier on, came up. But it's interesting how she said that the children's independence had deteriorated, and it might have been because the parents were doing too much with the children. So, for example, helping them put their shoes on, or even, you know, toilet training. She said that had deteriorated a little, but there were so few adverse effects compared to the beneficial ones. So let's watch the very last slide, which is just top tips on, you know, what to do perhaps if you were thinking of opening this type of setting.
So, Laura, we've had a brilliant visit to our wonderful forest school. I think what people out there might like to hear from you is, have you got any top tips for the environment and what you've created here and how you've done it?
So I think the biggest thing for me is the team. I think, you know, you have to love being outdoors, and you have to love being in this environment, because it changes all the time, it's not static, and so the team need to be able to adapt to that. And in addition, being outdoors, when you're indoors and you've got toys and you've got things, there's quite a safety in that. You feel like you've got activities to do, whereas when you're outdoors it's a bit more fluid, and the team need to be able to move with that, and they need to recognise in the children their interests and things that they want to do, and be prepared to go with it and take risks themselves.
So would you say it's about being bold and
Yes.
fearless of doing things wrong, because we're all human and sometimes we get things wrong, don't we?
Yeah. And then I think also, you don't need shiny, expensive equipment to do it. What you need to do is you need to have a good mind about how you can adapt things in the environment to use. And you'll see from around here, so the hay bales, for example, we needed a natural barrier, and you know, we looked at the natural environment and figured out what we could use. And we do that a lot in forest school. We recycle, we upcycle, you know, we beg, borrow and steal bits from here, there and everywhere to...
And I can see you've used kind of, you know, logs and sticks and grass and all the natural things that you've got around you.
Yeah.
So, you know, while you were creating this wonderful place, specifically for your children in COVID, what's your main outlay?
The tent's really beneficial, because we we actually then can transport the resources around the nursery, so drinking water, hand washing water, food, everything that the children need we can actually bring down here. But apart from that, we haven't really had any other huge expenses because we've used the things around us, and you know, parents have donated pallets that we've used into things, so you know, we haven't had a huge expense.
Brilliant. Well, that's what it's all about, isn't it? Working with what you've got.
Absolutely.
We need to apologise for the quality of that video at the beginning and throughout, because as you can probably hear, the wind really got up, but hopefully you got the gist of what Laura was saying. There was a slight also amateur filming, you know, we're not experts, but there was a slight cut in the video, and what you missed was that what she was saying was the main outlay was on the bell tent and also on the buggy to transport things to and from. But apart from that, they've begged, borrowed, not stolen, but you know, got things for free as and where they can. But one of the biggest things in that video for me is when Laura talked about having a good team and staff being flexible and willing to take risks and being fearless and bold. Because being outdoors, things changed rapidly. You know, suddenly we were in bright sunshine, then we were in, you know, quite a strong wind. You know, what can you do with those kind of elements? How can you use them to enhance the children's learning and find out what their interests are? But being outdoors all the time, really, as Laura said, it does depend on staff having a love for the outdoors. And sometimes we find that, you know, those staff that really don't want to be outdoors, eventually they do succumb and find a love for it. They can see the benefits and they can see the quality of learning that's going on out there. And also, there was one practitioner who once said to me, she said, when I'm outdoors, my well-being is so much better than when I'm indoors in the nursery. So it's benefits for all, really. So that's the end of the videos for Barnkids, but we just wanted to take a very brief moment to think about, you know, we, as Mary said, we realise you don't all have these all singing, all dancing, wonderful fields, forests, rivers, you know, at your settings. But it's really about what can you do with the space that you already have. And what we would say is now it's really the time to look at your outdoor areas to see what opportunities you're providing for children to be curious. You know, do you always have the same resources out there? In which case, you know, are your children doing the same thing with those resources and therefore stagnating because they haven't got anything new or exciting being added? So what we're thinking is that we want you to come away from thinking of the outdoors as time for recess or break time, as we call it in the UK, and start embracing and enhancing what you already have to keep your children outdoors for longer. And why not, indeed, like Laura, all day? Work with what you have, seek knowledge and inspiration from others. There's plenty of information and wonderful photographs like the ones I have on this slide that I simply got from going around the internet. Over here we have a nursery that's developed an actual curiosity approach, and it's called the Curiosity Approach, so please do try and Google that and you'll see the wonderful things that they're doing. And the picture in the top left hand corner is actually from their outdoor area. So work with what you've got and make your children curious, sustain that curiosity, and you really can't go wrong. Okay, so we're going to talk about Spartanburg now, and this is for Mary to talk to you.
Yes, well, it's really exciting as a new project has been developed by First Steps Spartanburg, I beg your pardon, and I'm helping them with it. It's being managed by Caitlin Watts, the Family Engagement Coordinator, And First Steps has received a substantial grant from First Steps South Carolina to develop an outdoor learning project in the Spartanburg area. And lovely Barbara Manofsky, the director in Spartanburg, has the vision to attempt to alienate nature deficit in the more disadvantaged areas of Spartanburg. So you'll see here a draft plan, and this is very much a draft, of what we're hoping to achieve. And it incorporates a lovely mud kitchen and a digging area, the wildflower sensory gardens, loose parts, building blocks area, etc., etc. And what we're really hoping is that it'll be developed to be a high quality outdoor learning environment at a minimal cost. And so the materials have either been donated or bought at very low cost. And once it's established, we're actually hoping that it will be like a benchmark of good practice for all of you in South Carolina, particularly in the Spartanburg, Greenville area, to actually go along and see something in practice, because I know you've seen videos and maybe you've read a lot, but there's nothing like actually having the practical experience. So once this is completed, I will ask ICS to put it on the website. So hopefully you can visit it yourselves in time. And the next slide, entitled Shopping for Outdoor Playscapes, it's really just showing where they got things. So they're on Facebook, Marketplace, and Craigslist, good old Craigslist. They got the sink. We would actually have loved them to get it for nothing, but good for them for only paying $30. Check with local tree removal companies and ask if they'd be willing to donate tree stumps and slices. Friends and family are great, particularly with old pots and pans and cooking utensils for the mud kitchen. And really, you know, be creative and use your resources. We also, you know, Laura, Rachel, and I am talking about the team. And I think the really important thing is that we need to be encouraging them to be part of this, and parents too. And I think it's always the naysayers who then become the born-again outdoor learning, you know, advocates. So encourage them too. And I think we're just about running out of time, so I'm going to stop there. But I did hear from Caitlin just last week that they were in a meeting regarding prospective sites. So I'll certainly keep you informed of what's happening there.
Okay, so that really concludes the webinar today. We've really enjoyed presenting it, and what we really hope is that you found it useful, inspiring, and above all else reassuring that operating safely outdoors within COVID guidelines really does work for children and adults, and your children will continue to learn whilst they're outside the classroom. You know, there's been this great worry about children being left behind and not keeping up. And I think this is the time to trust in your instincts and perhaps what you've learnt today, that it really is important to get children outdoors. And I hope that we've provided proof that children like being outdoors, that they're able to sleep outdoors, and they're able to occupy themselves with very little resources. And alongside that, the very best resources are the interactions between the staff and the children with their friends. Those are what really makes the difference to learning. So our message to you is to be confident in what you know is best for children, and be confident in what you think and do. Please, please, please be bold and creative and try things out. We expect children, we hope for children not to have a fear of failure and to have a go. And if we as adults do the same thing, guess what kind of children you're going to create. So take the time to reevaluate and rethink your vision and ethos. That's really important. Mary and I, when we're working with settings who are a little bit stuck, a little bit stale, we go right back to their vision and really make them drill down into what it is. What do you want your children to look like when they leave your practice and go on to school? So reflect on what you provide, not only for your children, for your parents as well. We must all hold on strongly to the fact that child development is what it is. It's not a race, and we put children in danger if we try to rush it on. And if we try to rush it on, we miss key stages in development. Above all, trust in your children to be the most amazing people you know they can be. So just before we switch off, we've got 3 videos for you that we thought would really complement what we've been saying. There's a video of a nature preschool, the first preschool kindergarten in nature in Seattle, and one over here, over the pond in Scotland, with Claire Warden, who runs Mind Stretchers. And the first video is just a really lovely illustration of how children learn best, and it's presented by a number of teachers. Then we have a book list, and this will all be up on the ICS website for you to refer to. So I hope you get some good reading out of that. Thank you very much for listening. That's the end of our webinar today. We hope to catch you again soon, and good luck with your practice and your evaluation and your reflections, and I hope to see you soon.
And thank you everybody for joining us. It's been wonderful to be so international, and good luck to all of you.